to the first episode of the If You Can't See podcast. We're your hosts, Cheyenne, Palmer, and Kuncha, and today we're going to be talking about all things reading and what it's like to read as a blind person. I think first we'll be covering Braille, and we'll be going into our own experiences with Braille, large print, CCTVs, audiobooks, all of that jazz. So, for the history of Braille, it's fascinating. I think as like a non-Braille reader or a non-Braille user, it's just interesting to see the evolution of it, like how in the 1800s this guy named William Moon developed this thing called Moonscript. I always thought it was Moon font, but it's either Moonscript or Moon text. And it was never like an outright copy of the Roman alphabet, but it was derived from it. It used like lines and curvatures to signify letters of the alphabet, but in a way that's easier for people to kind of read with their hands rather than with their eyes. And Louis Braille, who was born around the same time, developed Braille itself in 1821 after he was taught night reading, which was a thing that like soldiers in the army were taught because they needed a way to read without having a light source so they wouldn't get caught out by other armies. And it's fascinating because I think the biggest reason that Moon font or Moon script got kind of phased out is because it was optimized for speed of learning, but it wasn't optimized for like speed of reading. And it made it a lot harder to print books and stuff because it takes up so much real estate on the page. And then from there, as it got phased out, Braille became more widely used because it was like more compact and more efficient and optimized for, reading efficiency. And I think nowadays, like we have like large print, we have cameras and stuff that allow us to read like smaller print as if it was large print. We have audiobooks. Heck, even have tablets that are Braille displays, but you can actually draw on them. And I think it's probably a good time to cover some of our experiences with Braille.
I guess I'll explain a bit about my reading background. First, I started out with like using large print and regular print and CCTVs, but then when I was 8 years old, I started learning Braille and used it most of the time up until grade 10. I maybe was understanding a bit more about, say, like a screen reader, which is reading text from, say, a computer. And that was more because computers were going to be used more in post-secondary education. So over time, I'd say I went from learning grade 1 Braille, which is like your regular Braille, to then contracted Braille, which is basic symbols, and it helps keep more room on the page. And then there's obviously Nemeth Braille for math and music Braille for doing music writing, and that's broken down in between the 8-note, quarter notes, half, and whole notes. But do any of you guys have any questions for my experience with Braille?
Definitely. I want to learn, like, what was it like learning music Braille?
Well, at the time I was taking piano lessons, so I found out that 8 notes, it's kind of like, so what you'd think is a D. In regular Braille, it's actually a C note. A D note, music Braille, and 8 note is like an E, and it goes on and on like that. But the other notes I don't remember because it's been quite a long time. But what I can say is one of the ways I learned Braille is using a muffin tin. So the way to explain what a Braille cell is, it's 6 dots. So because I had sight, my teacher put sticky notes with the numbers 1 through 6, and one was placed in each hole, and then she used tennis balls so that way I could remember it. And over time, it went from there.
That's fascinating. It's crazy to think about like the evolution of Braille teaching aids too, because we went from, like you said, using a muffin tin to teach people Braille to now the Braille doodle, which has like the whole alphabet on the back. and like a Braille pen that you can write with.
I wasn't aware of the Braille pen, but I have heard of a lot of other devices. Like nowadays, one of the greatest devices, I think, even if you're blind or not, is the Hable One because you can type, but then at the same time, you can also like navigate your phone without, or your tablet without having to use your finger all the time. And then some of the letters in Braille relate to certain controls. So, say like you're reading a text message and you want to go back to the list of messages where you hold the letter B, so that would be dots one and two. Or if you want to go home, the home screen, you do H, which is dots one, two, five.
It's fascinating. And I know like with Braille, like when it comes to reading and stuff, we could probably talk all day about like Braille displays and like Braille books and all things Braille, but like what about like other forms of like reading and reading aids? Like I have experience with large print, but I'm sure that Kunsha has some insight on all of this as well.
Yeah, because you two seem more like CCTVs and large print users, where I'm more Braille, audio, and whatnot. So,
Definitely.
so I want to hear about your experiences using print because I know, like, when I was, and this will maybe go into a future topic, but writing stuff for school, and maybe you two saw this, I had like black and white paper, so you'd have lines for black, like that were black, so you know, okay, you're gonna write in those squares, and sometimes I'd be able to read the text that was on the paper.
That's actually cool. I think one of the hardest experiences for me is like getting like the large print textbooks because they would never know like what size to print a textbook or like any book out of. So I would walk into class with like these giant pieces of paper and of of course kids would look at me crazy because I'm like carrying like they have like a small textbook and here I am with like a flat screen TV sized piece of paper for like maybe like 6 pages of a textbook and like the when I got like my first CCTV it made reading so much easier and then like audiobooks and like the Daisy Reader that was always cool.
I can jump in.
Sure.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
you mentioned your experiences with the large textbooks, and honestly, I had a similar experience because usually I'm not a Braille user. I usually read the hard copies. I'm more used to that. They did try getting me involved in the like with Zoom text, for instance, so like screen readers, but I don't know. I just didn't find it to my liking because I was just always used to like reading on my own. But around like my school years, they introduced like the larger print for like paperworks or like worksheets and tests, for instance, and then the massive textbooks, which just they didn't even cover like one large textbook wouldn't even cover the standard textbook like all the way through. It would be like a quarter. For me personally, it would be a quarter of the standard textbook. So I would have like 2 to 3 huge textbooks just covering a one subject, for instance. And so carrying those around was kind of hilarious because people would be looking at them like, how are you even carrying those? Like, those are massive. So that was definitely an experience I had with the larger textbooks. So I just wanted to give my input on that as well.
Definitely. I can relate to you wanting like the hard copies of things because I'm that way too. Like I've always like even growing up if I couldn't get a fiction book in large print, I would often settle for the regular print and I just hold it right to my face. And like
Actually, that reminds me, because I go like all the way down. If I've got like a piece of paper or a book on a table, I go all the way down, so it like my nose is literally touching the paper, for example.
wait,
And yeah, And one time I remember like I was in the library of my secondary school, and I think it was one of the librarians or one of the staffs. She actually thought I ended up falling asleep, which obviously I wasn't, but yeah, it was like, yeah, because I'm going all the way down. So it does kind of, I get where they're coming from. It kind of looks like I am asleep. I even had that happen in like one of my co-ops where one of the staff members thought that when I was actually reading. So I can understand like where they're coming from. I would, if I like full sight, and I noticed that, I probably would assume the same if I wasn't aware. But yeah, just really some funny instances. And the other thing is, like, I've also had people when they do notice that I'm reading something so up close, they're like, "Your eyes are going to be really, they'll get damaged." And I always tell them they can't be more damaged than they already are. So yeah, it's an interesting experience I've had with the large print, but it's again something I'm more used to than the screen readers or magnifiers.
So when you told someone about the damage part, how would they react to that?
Usually I guess I kind of have to explain to them a little bit that my sight's been always like really bad. Recently it's been getting worse because like I can't, while I could basically hold up a book to my face essentially and read it without any magnifier needed. But for the last, I guess like I'd say like 2 years, that's been difficult because it's getting worse due to just some personal things happening. I can't even do that now because the whole thing is like blurry. It doesn't focus, and it kind of looks like double vision. But yeah, sometimes I do have to explain to them that, it's already bad. Like it can't really get much worse than it already kind of is. But that's about it.
Mm,
Usually for me, my experiences have really, for the most part, been, I guess, positive, where people are fairly understanding. So I guess I've been fortunate in that.
Definitely.
yeah.
I kind of had like a thought because thinking about like the use of screen readers and stuff to read, I've never thought about it like this before, but I feel like when you're somebody who reads on their own and then they get told to read a screen reader, it's kind of taking away your like autonomy in a sense because you're no longer doing the task that you're supposed to do. You're like outsourcing it to a machine. And that's just kind of like that's just something that I'm thinking about right now is like, huh, is it really reading if somebody's reading it to me?
I mean, I guess I'd say maybe for me, sometimes that's the case, but guess personally for me, it would be just out of habit. I mean, I've been told by my family, it'll be good for you to think of getting back into maybe screen reading or even learning Braille, but I just have that habit of like reading on my own. And I guess it's just, like how they say old habits die hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Agree.
It's kind of a situation like that. So again, just my personal experience.
definitely.
Yeah, because it's like for me, I was in school, I've been using Zoom text, so I was used to that. So when I was 13, I tried using that and I could tell like or harder to read the print on the screen. And eventually over time, maybe until like early grade nine. Yeah, that sounds about right. I started learning about screen readers and just understanding very slowly, like the emotional part, but then also the importance and that it was going to take a long time. And I find nowadays, like, you don't really stop learning new things about using it. But at the same time, I can understand now the importance of using the keyboard and not maybe using the mouse because you just can be a little faster.
Definitely. Well, it's like the difference between like what I talked about earlier, like moon script and Braille. Like if you're wanting speed, like, you're obviously gonna go for the thing that's more efficient. Like I've known some like blind people who are like quick with the keyboard and like they have their speech or text to speech like on like super fast mode. I'm like, how do you
Yeah.
understand that? But I also get like overstimulated easily.
No, yeah, you mentioned the speed of some screen readers, and there's no way, like they've got it like on I'd say like 70, maybe even 90 on speed. Like something like let's say JAWS, for instance. I'm not a JAWS user, but I've had colleagues that use JAWS and it is fast, like how the speed that they have it on.
Yeah.
And I am wondering, like, how do you, how can you understand such fast speed? Because again, I'm not used to it, so maybe because of that. But yeah, for me, it would be difficult to understand. It would for me, it would be a little bit of a slower speed.
Yes. When you listen, so the speaking rate I normally tend, well, at least with my phone, I'm not sure what it's like, say, on my Mac or Windows, but on my phone here, it's at about 70. And I can maybe do like 75, 80's probably my max, just because of wearing hearing aids. And I find if you put it at like 65 or lower, it's like a snail talking to a human, and it's like, well, who is this? Is this an animal talking? Like, I think that's what some people would think. I know with Android, the rate can be higher, like in numbers wise, but it's kind of like a mid range, I guess is the best way for me to explain, because you can put it like over 100%.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I get that. Like I've heard Jaws like at its lowest and it honestly sounds like a robot. So I get why some people just don't prefer that. It's literally like really electronic, it's monotonous and yeah, it's basically a robot speaking if it's not sped up a little bit.
Yeah, like I have an Android and the times I've tried to use the talkback feature as it's called,
Yeah.
it just like I found it unusable, but I guess for like experienced users, that's probably like so smooth to them. I find too that like with screen readers, it can be interesting or like even like audiobooks because like I remember when Daisy discs came out, I was like, "Oh, this is the coolest thing ever." And like as I've gotten like grown up kind of like studying voice work and stuff, I find it so cool that like in when it comes to like reading scripts for people with no vision, they actually have to have somebody reading it to them in the intonation that they need it read in. And like that whole world is fascinating to me. And I think that I've actually met somebody who can simultaneously listen to what their screen reader is telling them to read from a script and
Hmm.
like announce it as it's saying it. And like that's another skill that's interesting.
Yeah, it depends. Like if you're used to reading Braille, the nice thing is that people don't know you're even looking at it or that you're reading off of it, as long as you practice reading what your speech is or the script is. The only thing they may throw them off that you're like reading from the paper is if you're turning the page, whereas with the display, there's really no notice to it.
That is interesting too.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same thing. Because I know, like, when I've been listening on YouTube, The Blind Surfer, he talks about having to do the same thing and how exhausted he felt after recording an audiobook where he'd have the screen reader reading bits and pieces, and then he'd then have to be trying to record, like, what it came back to him. I think it's almost the same thing that you were saying earlier.
Yeah. CCTVs though. I know there's like AI CCTVs now, and like I remember when I first got mine, it was like this big thing, big towering machine that had like five different color settings maybe, and like the camera was sometimes grainy, and it was like the weirdest thing because like you had no privacy either if you were reading something, because then if somebody's sitting behind you, they could see what you're reading. And I was wondering, what are y'all's experiences with CCTVs?
Actually, you mentioned the no privacy thing with the CCTV. I remember like in my when I was in like secondary school, so high school, I had a CCTV. I used a CCTV at school. I can name like one experience. So apparently there we were having a quiz. I think it was a science quiz of some kind. And obviously I sat at the front because I had low vision. So I sat at the front. They ended up putting the CCTV on the table on the desk. And it's really funny because I'm just writing down my answers. And it didn't even occur to me at that point that, there's a massive screen and whoever is behind me can literally see it. Later on, like when we had like a parent teacher meeting, as like schools usually do, um, it had occurred to me at that point, and I'm like, this was something that could have happened. So we might need to actually change the positioning, the location of the desk. And from there on, so my desk, whenever I was using the CCTV, it would be on a separate desk that would be like to the side. And then like whenever I needed to use it, or I would actually just stay on that desk with the CCTV so that apparently nobody else, no other student, let's say, would apparently be able to, if we're doing tests, look at the answers, or my answers at least. So that was just something interesting that you brought up about the no privacy thing. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experiences on that.
I can definitely relate to that feeling because, like, I don't know, I've never had the experience of it being at the front of the class, but I remember like marching to the back of the class just to use the CCTV or like an entirely different room in general, just so that like I can do my work and see it properly, even with like the big paper that they used to give you.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, so I was in a rural school for kindergarten through grade 5, and think it may have been second, third grade maybe when I started using a CCTV. I'm not entirely sure on that part, but I know there were times where I would go into a resource room, kind of. It's just very small. Often that's where they would put the CCTV. So most of the time, pretty rarely that I had to use it in school. I'm not sure how often, but I know it was never for a test or anything like that where I had to use it. But I do agree because it was sitting on a tower kind of thing. So you'd have the screen sitting up there, and then you'd have the tray underneath and whatnot.
No, yeah, I wasn't actually familiar that because like experiences that you guys have is obviously different than mine because mine was it just stayed within the classroom.
Yeah, well, that's just what I remember because I
I
remember like it was on this trolley. So
Mhm.
maybe sometimes it was in the classroom, maybe it wasn't. I'm not 100% certain because that's just what I remember. I didn't have to like use it a lot. Often, what was happening was either it was photocopied to be like a large print size, and then I could just like read a book, for instance, once in a while, or I guess more times at home, I used a CCTV in the corner, and that was kind of private because there's like a wall on one side and whatnot. So if I had to read a book, that's kind of where I would go at home. In school, my memory of the CCTV is a little different. I only just remember the odd occasions where I had to use it because, like, sometimes I was taken out of class for certain things, and that's just where I remember using it. And then I also remember seeing it on a big trolley kind of thing.
I think it's a matter of the way the school works, because like I know that like I have a big enough budget to help supply like a bunch of people. Like depends on how many like blind people are in the school or whatever. But if you have multiple, there might only be enough budget for one of each thing. And if that's the case, then like it's like tough luck. Y'all gotta share. But if it's like one person, then maybe they could have it be in the classroom that you're in the most, or in some cases, you might have to go to like another room just so that you can use it. And I think that's more common in like high school and stuff because you have the whole like moving classes thing. But
Yeah.
slant boards.
Oh, those I do remember.
I was
Those,
curious about that because I know that Kunsha, you had said that you had to like bend right over your paper to read, but slant boards would have been like a godsend, I think, in that scenario.
Oh, I actually believe I do have a slant board at home, but like it gives me like a backache, I guess.
Really?
So
yeah, I guess because like you often
yeah.
lean.
Yeah.
So that's putting stress on your back, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I thought because the reason I had one was to kind of help mitigate that like back stress and
I guess
yeah.
it could also depend on posture. I'll be honest, I don't have the best posture.
Well, neither do I. And I think
I'm
that's the same for any blind person.
well, that's
Uh,
just it. Like that's why they brought the slant boards in is kind of help us with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I do have it. I used it for a short while and then I just stopped. I put my MacBook on it. I never really used it at school. I used it at home for like a little while during like my university years, post-secondary years. Uh, but then I just stopped using it.
yeah, I think I used mine maybe up until the end of grade 4.
Really? I think I used mine all the way up until high school, and then that was it. Like college, I didn't. That was the one thing I didn't get to bring out of school with me was the slant board. But I loved it because like I was like an avid reader, and like I would just read constantly, and that was perfect for that and drawing too. So I'm reading our show notes, and you said there's something written here about using monoculars to read.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
What is that like? Because I remember using monoculars to like read from a distance.
Yeah, so I think I got the monoculars. I had the one monocular. I think I got it like in secondary school or high school. I didn't use it much then because I had the CCTV camera, not the like I had the CCTV as well, but I also had the CCTV camera, which I could basically just plug in into the laptop. And what it would do is it would just screen would just basically pop up and I would be able to kind of see on the laptop what the camera was projecting. Yeah. And then I ended up using the same thing in when I went into post-secondary for most of the years there. But around the close to the end of my post-secondary years, university years, I don't know, something just went wrong with the camera. So I ended up using the monocular. So it kind of works similarly to a binocular, but the name suggests, it's a monocular. So you're using just the one eye. You're holding it up to one eye. And what it does is you can basically zoom in and out and also focus, similar to how you would basically use binoculars, essentially. So that's basically how it's used. And it's also portable. So it's not like huge, it's tiny. You can basically just put it in a tiny pouch and just put the string around your neck and just carry it around. So it's pretty portable. Sometimes it's handy. But yeah, that's like my post-secondary years are really when I mainly started using the monocular itself. Otherwise, I hadn't really used it much up until then.
I grew up in like grade school using the monocular and the binoculars, and it was interesting. I have a pair of eSight, which they're cool, and it's like an overpowered binoculars in a sense. Like
Hmm.
yeah.
they're all right, but they're kind of impractical. And I notice with a lot of reading aids or like fixes for reading, they can be very impractical. And
Yeah,
I
no,
was,
like any reading aid, it would still have its limit.
Mm-hmm.
There would be
yeah,
always a limit to how much it can go.
It's kind of like, say, holding the phone up and then you're trying to line it up to read the text, and then it's like a dance of, is it lined up right? And then you find out, oh, it's getting all this stuff out. That's not what I wanted to hear. It's not lined up.
Exactly.
yeah. I think it's hard because like reading is like a thing that like just is default. Like unless you have like a reading disability, like it is default. Being able to read, and when people ask you like how do you read if you're blind, they don't realize that like it's a spectrum and like your vision can also be like temperamental too. Like I sometimes I have good vision days, sometimes I have bad vision days. Sometimes it's not even my vision, it's stigmatism, which I actually have a pair of reading glasses that don't help with the font or anything. They just help keep my eyes kind of focused on the word so that way I'm not like wandering.
You mentioned glasses. Like I also wear glasses. They're prescribed like prescription glasses, so they're not really reading glasses. But
Hmm.
like I've noticed, like my parents always ask me, like, or even my doctor. eye doctors, they ask, do the glasses actually help? Like, are they a benefit? Or are they like an advantage? Do they make a difference? And I'm
Hmm.
like, well, personally, I wouldn't know. I don't think that they make much of a difference except for making it just a little bit clearer. But it's not gonna like solve the issue of, the fact that I can't really see at a distance.
Well, that's
So it
just
doesn't
it.
really,
Yeah,
so the glasses don't really help
yeah, I
that.
kind of agree at least with Cheyenne's point because I have good days and bad days with my eyes, and like you, Koja, I had prescription glasses for a very long time, and then over the past few years I had some both two cataracts removed, one from each eye, and I'm fine that I don't really need prescription glasses anymore. And it's kind of like what the doctor figured that that would be the case. I just need like regular sunglasses. But the thing I find is, well, they got to be able to like wrap around the eye because there are going to be days where I definitely need to wear the glasses, and then there are days when I don't.
That's actually good to know, Palmer, because I actually have developing cataracts right now. And that's why like my sight's getting really bad. So I'm gonna have like surgery to get them removed. Obviously it's gonna be one eye at a time, but like it's good to know that might be a thing.
Yeah, it depends because, like, for me, mine were stable, but the doctor figured we might as well take them out, like, right now. And he left it to me to decide. And like, my eyes, they were okay, but if he was recommending it and he was going to do it himself, then I didn't see why not to take the opportunity. And then just kind of trust his advice on that because
Mm.
he was the one doing it.
Yeah. I mean mine aren't stable, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, because what I
Yeah.
can say is it may help bring more light in, but it's possible it really won't change the vision. It really depends on the person. It may help bring like more sunlight in, but I don't think it would help like say with reading. It really depends on the
Mhm.
person.
Yeah, no, no, no. They've made it clear to me that your sight's not going to get any better. All it's going to do is just remove the cataracts, but it's still going to be bad. It'll just go back to what it was before the cataracts started, which was still bad, but it's not as bad like as it is now. So yeah, no, I guess like with cataracts, if your vision loss is a result of the cataracts and you get them removed, then yes, there is occasionally a chance that it can be improved, like your vision. But if that your vision can be improved if it's caused by cataracts, but if not, like if there's other reasons, then it won't be curing the sight overall. It'll just get rid of the cataracts.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Like I've heard of people developing cataracts, and I wonder if that's like condition specific or if it's like just end all be all type thing. Because I know like I attended one of the connecting the dots events, and apparently I learned that my condition is pretty rare and that like it doesn't like affect reading in terms of like what I can actually see on paper. Like I don't have floaters or like any sort of blockage. It's just that my optic nerve never developed. And I've always been curious to as to like, is it frustrating to like read when things are like in the way or if your vision's like clouded?
I can give some insight into that because I've got developing cataracts, as I said. And yeah, it does. Like, if you're, let's say, it depends. Like, if you haven't had cataracts, but your sight is like still bad, but it's at a point where you can still have like some kind of independence, but then you develop cataracts. So usually the thing about cataracts is, as far as I've heard, it's age related. So usually the older you get, the higher your chances of getting the cataract because sight just tends to kind of reduce or diminish like when or get bad like when you age. But if you've got like, let's say, existing complications already at a younger age, um, then there is a chance that it could develop. Like in my case, that's what happened. That's what they told me, because I had like existing conditions already. So that's why it developed so early for me. But yeah, when it comes to reading, like I said, I could read. I could hold a book up to my face before, like 2 years back, 3 years back. I could hold a book up to my face and still read it, even though it was not, the sight wasn't good. But nowadays, like what, even if I put it up to my face, I can't read it because it's literally blurry. It looks like double vision. It doesn't stay still. And then occasionally you get the floaters, as you mentioned. Uh, so it's the also the like, I don't know if anybody, if either of you two have these, but it's like the weird blurry black squiggles that occasionally come up.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
had them, and I even noticed them like after getting the surgery, at least on the right eye. So it kind of took a bit of getting used to again because they didn't pop up for quite a long time. So it can be at least blurry and a different experience. And I know, like before when I was younger, I used to get them, and maybe quite a bit. I know when reading print, it could be a bit tiresome. So that's kind of when I tried like changing it from maybe like a light background to a darker background on the screen, so the text would be black, but the thing surrounding it would be white, kind of.
Yeah, for me as well. Like I've noticed, like, so ever since the cataract, like, even before, like I had some issues with like the brightness of light, but it wasn't nearly as bad as what it is now. Nowadays, like, you do get tired staring at a screen for like too long, especially if it's bright. So what I ended up doing is I just like changed the contrast. So before it used to be black text on white background, the standard. But since the cataract, I changed it to like on my screen, I changed it to white text on black background. So it just, because for me personally, it just kind of helps at this point. I don't know, like in the future after the surgery, how it's going to be, but that's just what I've done right now. And it's kind of reduced that strain a little bit. But I still find that like I can't read for long periods at this point due to the cataracts.
I think it's interesting because we talk about like eye strain and reading fatigue and, different settings on computers. But something I've noticed is that when it comes to reading, like if I read a book, my eyes don't hurt and they don't get as tired as they do when I'm sitting in front of a giant monitor all day.
Yeah, I would
Does
bet because you're like looking at maybe this is maybe my guess. You're looking at blue light because maybe it's a brighter color. You're having to adjust, and then that's putting strain on the eye. And then for you, it makes it a bit more tiring, I guess. The more you read or the more you stare at that monitor.
Yeah, I would assume it is the blue light as well.
Definitely. I think too, like with the advent of all this blue light and stuff, it must like be harder to read for some people because I know dark mode exists, but you don't have
Mhm.
like a yellow on black mode or a black on yellow mode or like high contrast modes unless you actually know how to go into your settings and change that as well.
Yeah,
And
some more like, I'd say, I guess the more advanced versions of the, like for example MacBooks or like iPads or iPhones would probably have those, but older versions probably wouldn't, so it would be difficult.
Yeah,
okay.
and I think, yeah, and the reason why a lot of people use like an Android device is because the screen is bigger, so they're able to see way more text on it and they can adjust it to a certain degree.
Do you guys think that so reading comprehension and like people who have gone from maybe large print to audiobook to Braille or from Braille to like large print. Do you think like all of these mediums have an effect on like reading comprehension, like in the long run?
It's hard to say. It depends because it at the end of the day, like you're trying to understand, I guess, what's being said, and sometimes it can, at least when you're trying to write something, like you do notice that it's maybe hard to understand or write down your thoughts versus, say, explaining your point by verbally.
I would say, yeah, I would agree with Palmer, Cheyenne, about like reading comprehension, like if it would have if different reading mediums would have an effect on comprehension. But I guess just to add on to what Palmer said, I guess it also depends on what kind of a learner one is. Some people are visual learners, others are more like verbal or audio learners. So maybe it also depends on the type of learning style people have so that they can comprehend a text, for instance. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Because, like, I know for me, maybe when I was younger, like, I was more visual because I could, like, read stuff and see things pretty well, at least on TVs and things like that. So it was easy to pick up. Whereas with not having great hearing, but hearing, like, using a lot of hearing stuff like audiobooks and screen readers, that it kind of does affect because then you're having difficulty comprehending how you want to say it, and then eventually someone comes back to you and says, well, what do you mean when you write that? And then you realize,
Mhm.
okay, well, that's not it. It's not, maybe not what I was trying to say. And it turns out that you may have just confused your audience, or at least a teacher maybe.
Just to add on as well, uh, I guess, like, let's say, for example, if a person is a visual learner, so maybe they're using like large print, for instance, and then they suddenly have to switch to, let's say, a screen reader. So maybe that could also, because then after that, they have to kind of learn to, in a way, listen to audio. So it kind of changes the learning style as well. So it also depends on, like, um, as I mentioned before, like what type of a learning style one is used to and one finds preferable. But if you need to, let's say, for whatever reason, you need to change from one learning style to the other, for whatever reason, that also requires some kind of adaptability as well. And for some people, it's pretty easy to adapt to different learning styles. For others, though, it probably isn't as easy. It could take some time until they actually get used to a new learning style. So that's another thing that I just wanted to add on. And I
Yeah.
get, and I guess for me, like earlier on, I mentioned that I was more like I'd prefer reading on my own rather than a screen reader. I guess that's kind of also the reason why I don't really prefer the screen reader, because I'm myself more of a visual learner in a way. So I just learn best by reading and doing things on my own rather than having someone basically read things out to me.
Yeah, because it's kind of the same thing too with tactile. Like people say you're
Mhm.
gonna know how to spell properly by just reading the Braille and
Yeah.
whatnot, but really nowadays people can't really spell that great anyway, kind of.
Mhm.
And then the other problem from like a Braille perspective is the technology is pretty expensive and there's not really a lot of people teaching it. So people are more using screen readers and audio stuff to use, but they're not maybe learning everything properly. But it's nice that what Lego's done is they've got like the Braille bricks, so it's kind of nice that any age group they've got something they can use to learn. So, for instance, say you wanted to know what the letter A was in Braille, but you weren't sure what it was, well, then you could just hold it up to a sighted person and they would see the same thing. So then you'd be able to kind of practice that way. And I'd say, too, it depends if you're going to learn Braille, it depends on how your age. Because let's say, for instance, you're in elementary or secondary school, well, then you're going to want to learn as much as you can about Braille because, especially in elevators, they use Braille. And if you're totally blind, it's going to be pretty challenging to know like what floor you're going to. So that's one important thing versus say maybe you're much older than like say someone who's in elementary or secondary school. That's kind of where it depends on what you're willing to learn. If you want to learn everything about Braille, then okay, go for it. But if maybe that's not a thing for you, then just learning letters, numbers, and punctuation symbols is probably all you're going to need. And the reason I say that is because there's contracted Braille, which is known as grade 2, and that's where they've got symbols that help make shorter words, or they may use like one dot and then one letter. So, for instance, the word part in grade 2 is dot 5 and then the letter P. Or say the word quick, for example, it's just 2 letters in grade 2 Braille.
That actually explains a lot because when I was working on a logo for another podcast, I thought it'd be cool to write something out in Braille. But when I went online and I used a text to Braille translator, what it did was it translated my text into Braille, but then translated it back to text. And in a way, like they used contracted Braille for the words instead of like like the whole alphabet. And I found that fascinating.
Yeah,
And
yeah, because
I
what it's trying to do is it's trying to shorten how many words are on a page. Because, like, say you had a novel that I don't know, it's like 100 chapters. Well, that could maybe be 150 books, maybe of Braille. Whereas if you use contracted, it could be less. I really don't know the numbers. I'm just making them up what I think it could be. But yeah, that's kind of why they went to using contracted Braille.
And I think that's interesting too, because I know you guys, we were talking about reading comprehension and acuity and learning styles. And I think it's fascinating because you look at like the history of Braille, and Britain still uses like moon script for like elders who may not have the neuroplasticity to learn Braille, but they have enough to trace letters with their fingers.
Yeah, I have that too because at my apartment building, what they've done on the units and outside the elevators is they have they have the printed text so you can feel it. And for me, that's kind of nice because I remember like what numbers look like, and just by feeling them, I know exactly what it feels like. And then by the elevators, they got both the textured number, so like what a sighted person can see, nice and big, and then underneath it, there's the floor number.
That's really neat. I wanted to touch on earlier too, like it kind of scares me. Like we're all going the way of like having things like screen readers and audiobooks. And it kind of concerns me for the next generation because like we're already losing like reading comprehension as is, even for like sighted people. And what worries me is that if we're not going towards Braille, which clearly we're not, we're all doing the audio stuff, it's going to be a lost art too. And that's kind of sad to think.
Yeah, I think it's almost like it's not about how much vision you have, it's whether your vision's fine right now. It should be what is your vision going to be in 20, 30, 40 years, and maybe you don't have any vision, and then you'll feel like, or you'll regret, hey, I wish I had learned Braille. And really, as a kid, you're not going to think about that because you're just going to think about being a kid. So I think it's also kind of on the education person or the doctor to say, your sight is good right now, you don't need to learn Braille or do anything like that. But really, nobody knows what the future is going to be like. Just because something's good doesn't mean you shouldn't learn it, because
Exactly.
you don't know the future of things.
Yeah, that's true. But like, unfortunately, like, because everything is basically just going virtual and electronic, it's kind of inevitable that even like with reading technologies, they're more focused right now on creating the more electronic type rather than focusing on the more traditional. When, in my opinion, it honestly should be a balance of both, a mix of both. That way, like we talked about preferences, even some may, like, for example, the older generation. So when I was working, it was basically working with others who had sight loss. And what I noticed was that, even with sight loss in general, one of the biggest hurdles is technology, reading or otherwise. And so learning technology is great, but at the same time, keeping that skill of reading, let's say, for instance, the traditional skill is also going to be a benefit because, let's say, for example, what if, like, for whatever reason, you don't have that technology in the future due to whatever reason? How would you navigate essentially from there on? So I think, like, personally, it should be a mix of both the traditional and the technological rather than just focusing on the technological and then just completely getting rid of the traditional.
Yeah, because it's been shown that you're having more brain development writing with a pencil. And it's probably the same thing too with reading
Exactly.
with your eyes or with your hands, that you're getting more brain development doing that way than versus, say,
Passive.
using a keyboard.
Hmm.
It's also been shown too that when people take notes using notebooks, they're able to get more info down, I think.
Exactly. They're able to follow along more clearly. Even it helps with memory as well when you write down notes by hand rather than just, let's say, for example, typing it up or just following it along.
Yeah.
In an audio,
Yes.
visual, sorry, verbal manner. So when you write the notes down, it also, your memory is basically retained. You get better recall by writing, actually physically writing the notes down. And that's something that I ended up, like I did do when I was in university. I wrote down the notes on pieces of paper for all my lectures. So
Mm.
I think, like,
Yeah.
it should be, especially educational institutions, they should really place emphasis on both the traditional and the
Yeah.
technological and not just one over the other.
Specifically for reading, based on like my own research, I found that like books are like better for your brain than like a computer. And it's not just because of blue light, and it's not just because in our case we're passively listening to a screen reader. It's because your brain has to take the time to really digest the words. Whereas if you're listening to it, you're not like it could literally just go out one year and in the other, or in one year out the other.
Mhm.
And like with a book or Braille, and like I was just thinking about how you mentioned the writing portion, like for a Braille reader, Braille user, they get the best of both worlds because they might be typing on a keyboard, but they also have to go back and like read it with their fingers.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm hoping at some point there'll be Optima Braille laptop that's supposed to be coming out. And I'm thinking, oh, well, that would be kind of cool because then you have the best of both worlds. But honestly, whenever you're using a Braille display, you actually need the screen reader on to use the Braille display at the same time. So if, say, you didn't want the screen reader going, you almost have to like mute the speech, kind of. So that can be one thing to consider. And I guess it's kind of like when you have the Braille display and the screen reader going. If, say, your hands are getting tired, but you want to use that device, then you can like still navigate the screen kind of. I don't know. It depends on like what you have and what you're using. I guess it's also true too, like even if you're blind, you have to be able to develop good memory skills because there could be times where you're given some info, but then how are you going to write it down so that way you can go back to it? And like
Definitely.
one example for me is memorizing phone numbers. And often people say, well, you can really only remember 7 numbers or something like that at a time, but I don't think that's totally true if a phone number is 10 numbers. And sometimes if you add in an extension, that could be an extra 3 or 4 numbers on top of that.
Yeah.
So you have to come up with memorizing strategies. So with phone numbers, for instance, when you're reading it, you have to look at how many times there's the same number and then subtract how many there are of one of the number in that telephone number itself.
I think it's a matter of neuroplasticity because, like, if you use your brain, if you're doing like brain games and you're reading and you're writing and, you're doing things that help your brain be active, then you can remember as much or as little as you want. I think like speaking in averages kind of hurts a lot of things because it makes people think, oh, that's the limit. I can only do this much. And I think that's common in the blind community too. Like when somebody asks, oh, how do you read? It's like, well, for some of us, it's like, oh, I just do it. But like for some people, whether they're newly blind or whether they're like they've dealt with vision loss their whole life, like it's a matter of reminding yourself that you can do it and that you should learn multiple formats just in case. Because if you're deaf blind even, like what good's a screen reader if you can't like hear it a lot, or if you lost all of your hearing? And what good is Braille if you can't use it, in a sense, if you haven't learned it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. You're kind of stuck. Like you only have just the one way to communicate. So like it's almost like you need the braille to read what you're saying, and then if you were talking to someone and maybe you could like speak, but at the same time then you could just use the screen reader to say this is what I meant, kind of thing. Like, say what
Yeah.
they did in Big
Yeah.
Bang Theory. They did that one episode where the main character he couldn't talk for whatever reason, so he would type, and then I think he was letting voiceover read it back to another actor or something like that.
That's funny. Was there anything else that we wanted to cover on this topic of reading?
I I don't think so. I've covered pretty much everything that was on from my perspective.
Yeah, I think I covered everything that was on my end as well.
I think we had a good discussion, and I hope that our listeners enjoyed our conversation as well. And if they have anything they'd want to chime in, or if they want to suggest future topics, I think they should comment wherever they are, whatever platform they're on. And yeah, I think we had a good discussion.
You agree?
Yep, definitely.